nut which struck her on the breast. She made no outcry, but her hands let go their hold, and she fell far down to the earth. But the men still trembled, and were afraid to come down out of the tree, for she struck in a swampy place and was long in dying. All afternoon she lay there, weeping and lamenting, until at sunset the spirit left her body. When she was dead, they took her to Raiatea and buried her in her marae. After that the two men returned to Papenoo, and when the king died, the son of the Lizard Woman reigned long in his stead. These are true words, for the blood of swimmer in the sea, born of the Lizard Woman, flows in my veins. Old Airima ceased to speak. From the coconut shell at her side she took a lump of black native tobacco and began to tear off a leaf for a fresh cigarette. Her granddaughter turned on one side, head resting on a folded forearm, and looked at me. "Aye, these are true words," she said, "for is my name not the same as that of the Lizard Woman? During 1,000 years, perhaps more, mai tikito mai, since the beginning, the women of our family have been called Tahitian. You yourself, though we call you Faery, have a real name among us, Amona, after her son. These names belong to us. No other family does well to use them." The flare of a match illuminated for an instant the wrinkled and aquiline face of Airima. As she tossed the glowing stick aside, the moonlight smoothed away the lines. I was aware only of her black eyes, wonderfully alive and young. "Tell him of Poia," she suggested, "and the dead ones in robes of flame." "Aye," said the girl, "that is a strange tale, and it came about because of a name." She sat up, shaking her black hair over her shoulders. "The woman who saw these things," she went on, "was another of our ancestors. She was called Poia, a name her grandfather had given. She lived in Tai-Nu Iti, in Batea, where Tahitian first stopped to weep. One day in mid-afternoon Poia was sitting in the house beside her mother, busy with weaving of a mat. All at once a darkness closed in before her eyes, and she felt the spirit struggling to leap from her body. It was like the pangs of death, but at last her spirit was free, and with its eyes she saw her body lying as if in sleep, and perceived that there were strangers in the house, 2 women and a man. The women were very lovely, with flowers in their hair and robes of scarlet which seemed to flicker like fire. They were Viharatuna and Viharatuna ancestors, dead many years before, who loved Poia dearly. The man was likewise dressed in flaming scarlet, and he wore a tall headdress of red feathers. He was Tanetua, another of Poia's ancestors. The 3 had come from the Maori to seek Poia, and they spoke to her kindly, saying, "Come with us, daughter." And though she felt shame when she looked down at her dull dress and disordered hair, she followed where they led. They took her to a marae of Tuinuirahi, and where Poia saw a huge woman waiting for them. The right side of that woman was white, and the left side black. When she saw them coming, she fell on her knees and began to weep for joy. "It is you, Poia," she cried. "Then welcome." As Poia stood there marveling, the stone of the marae opened before her like the door of a great house, and Viharatuna said to her, "Go in." The door gave on a chamber of stone. The floor was of stone, and the ceiling and walls. They passed through another door into a second empty room of stone, and thence into a third, and there Poia chanced to look down at herself. She had become lovely as the others. Her hair was dressed with flowers, and her robe was scarlet, seeming to flicker like fire. When she was looking at herself, no longer ashamed, the 2 women said to her, "You must stay here, for you belong to us. We are angry with your grandfather because he called you Poia. That is not all of your name. Your true name is Tetanuni Poia Tere Maheta. That name belongs to us, and you must have it, for you are our descendant, and we love you." She did not know that this was her name. She thought it was only Poia. in spite of their kindness, she was frightened and told them that she wished to go home. They took her to the door of her house and left her there, and she found herself lying with the half-woven mat in her fingers. Her mother, who was sitting beside her, only said, but Poia, in fear and wonder at what she had seen, said nothing to her mother, not even when the two went to bathe. The next day in mid-afternoon Poia felt the darkness close in before her eyes, the pangs of death as her spirit struggled and at last escaped from the body. But this time she found herself gloriously clothed and beautiful at once. All went as before until they came to the third chamber of the moray. There were leaves spread on the floor of that place, as if for a feast, but the only food was purple flowers. The others sat down and began to eat, and Poia attempted to do likewise, but the taste of the flowers was bitter in her mouth. Again the two women said, "You belong to us. You must not be called Poia, but Tetoni Poia Tari Matatinaya." And they coaxed her to stay with them, but she wept and said that she could not bear to be separated from her husband whom she loved. As before, they were kind to her and took her to her house, where she awoke as if from sleep and said nothing. It was the same the next day, but this time, when they came to the third chamber of the moray, Vahinetua and Vahinetua said, "Now you must no longer think of returning. You are ours, and we wish you to stay here with us." Poia wept at their words, for she began to think of the man she loved. "I must go," she said. "If I had no husband, I would gladly remain with you here." At last, when her tears had fallen for a long time, the three dwellers in the moray took her home. They bade her farewell reluctantly, saying that next day she must come to them for good. This time Poia awoke in great fear, and she told the story to her mother when they went to bathe together. Her mother went straight to the grandfather to tell him what she had seen, and ask him if her true name was Poia, as he had said years before. Then the old man said that he had done wrong, for the name was not only Poia, but Tetanoia Poia Tari Matarina, a name which belonged to Vahinetua and Tanetua, and Vivatatatua, and these three came no more to get Poia. They were content, for they loved her and wanted her to have their name. As she finished her story, Tehinatu lay down once more, resting her head on her grandmother's knee. My thoughts were wandering far away across a great ocean and a continent, to the quiet streets of New Bedford, set with old houses in which descendants of the whalers live out their ordered lives. In all probability the girl beside me, Polynesian to the core, and glorying in a long line of ancestors whose outlandish names fell musically from her lips, had cousins who lived on those quiet streets. For she was the granddaughter of a New Bedford whaling captain, the husband of Arima, a Puritan who ate once too often of the fay and lingered on the islands to turn trader and rear a family of half-caste children, and finally to die. The story is an old one, repeated over and over again in every group. The white cross, the half-white children at the parting of the ways, the turning aside from the stony path of the father's race to the pleasant ways of the mother, and so in the end the strain of white, further diluted with each succeeding generation, shows itself in nothing more than a name, seldom used and oftentimes forgotten. It is nature at work, and she is not always cruel. "Is it the same with names in your land?" Airmina was asking. "Are certain names kept in a family throughout the years?" "It is somewhat the same," I told her, "though we do not prize names so highly. My father and grandfather and his father were all named Charles, which you call Tari. Among my people," she said, "the possession of a name means much. As far back as our stories go, there has been a man named Maurice in each generation of my father's family. Some of these Maurices are strange men. There was Maurice Terravona Eno, who fished with a bait of coconut for the spirits of men drowned in the sea, and another was Maurice Matatofa, who stole a famous shark, the adopted child of a man of Faery. That was a good shark. It lived in the lagoon, harming no one, and every day the man and his wife